The darkness pressed in, suffocating.
He thrashed, desperate for escape. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum in the silence.
Each breath was shallow, ragged. This wasn't a dream. This was a nightmare, and there was no waking up.
He was trapped. His every thought, every fear echoed in the vast emptiness of his subconscious. The air grew thick with dread. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that something was terribly wrong.
This wasn't just any nightmare. This was different. This was real, and it was about to get much worse.
Her face swam into focus. Those eyes, once filled with warmth, now stared at him with an icy coldness that sent a shiver down his spine.
He remembered the sting of her words, the finality in her voice as she uttered the words that shattered his world.
It's over.
He had been discarded, tossed aside like a broken toy. The pain of her rejection was a living thing, gnawing at his insides, fueling a rage that threatened to consume him.
He had loved her, and this was how she repaid him. He wouldn't let her get away with it. He would make her pay.
Hate, a venomous serpent, coiled around his heart, squeezing tight. His thoughts turned dark, fueled by the poison of betrayal.
He imagined her pain, her fear, and it brought him a twisted satisfaction. He would become her nightmare.
He began subtly, whispers of her name in the dead of night. Objects moved, misplaced, just enough to unsettle her.
He reveled in her growing anxiety, her confusion. His anger, a raging fire, consumed every rational thought. He was losing himself in his desire for revenge.
Her lifeless eyes stared up at him, devoid of the spark that had once drawn him in. He had gone too far.
His rage, his need for vengeance, had driven him to a place of no return. He had taken her life, but in doing so, he had condemned himself.
Her spirit, tethered to him by the broken bond of their love, rose from her lifeless form. Her spectral form flickered, a pale imitation of the woman he had loved, twisted by rage and a thirst for vengeance.
He had become the haunted, his nightmare taking on a terrifying new form. He was trapped, not just in his own personal hell, but with the vengeful spirit of the woman he had loved and destroyed.
Panic clawed at his throat.
He had made a terrible mistake.
He thrashed against the invisible bars of his prison, his mind a chaotic storm of fear and regret. His thoughts raced, searching for a way out, a solution to this horrifying predicament.
Then through the fog of his terror came a glimmer of hope.
A voice, ancient and powerful, whispered in the depths of his mind. Heal the broken bond, it intoned, or be forever bound to her wrath.
He could fix this. He could atone for his sins. He could forgive himself. And more importantly, could he earn her forgiveness? Time, once a steady river, became a rushing torrent. Every tick of the clock was a hammer blow to his sanity.
He could feel her presence growing stronger, her anger a palpable force threatening to crush him. He had to act fast.
He revisited the memories of their love, the shared laughter, the whispered secrets, the small gestures of affection. He clung to these fading embers of their past, desperately trying to rekindle the flame that had once burned so brightly between them. Each memory was a painful reminder of what he had lost and what he stood to lose forever if he failed. Section 7. A Race Against Time.
He reached out, his hand trembling towards her spectral form.
The air crackled with energy, a tangible manifestation of her anger.
He flinched, but pressed on, driven by a desperate hope and a love that refused to die.
He poured out his heart to her, his voice raw with remorse and regret.
He confessed his sins, his jealousy, his rage.
He begged for her forgiveness, not for his sake, but for hers.
He needed her to find peace, to find release from the chains of her anger.
His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of his actions and the sincerity of his remorse. Section 8. The Weight of Forgiveness.
The air grew still.
Her spectral form hovered before him, her expression unreadable.
He held his breath, his heart pounding against his ribs, awaiting her judgment.
The silence stretched, an eternity compressed into a single agonizing moment.
Then a single tear, shimmering like a diamond, rolled down her cheek.
Her anger, the palpable force that had threatened to consume him, began to dissipate, replaced by a profound sadness.
He watched, his own heart breaking, as she turned away from him, her form fading with each passing second.
He had failed. Section 9, the final confrontation.
Her spectral hand shot out, icy cold, wrapping around his throat.
He choked, his vision blurring as she drew him close, her eyes burning with a cold fire.
You had your chance, she whispered, her voice a chilling rasp. And you chose vengeance over love.
He looked into her eyes and saw no reflection of the woman he had loved.
Only his own terror mirrored back at him.
He closed his eyes, accepting his fate.
He had been given a chance, a way out, and he had squandered it.
He deserved whatever punishment awaited him.
His world went black.
Section 10, freedom or eternal torment.
He woke with a gasp, his body drenched in sweat.
He sat up, his mind reeling, trying to separate nightmare from reality.
The remnants of her touch lingered, a phantom chill on his skin.
He was free, for now.
He had been given a second chance, a reprieve from the consequences of his actions.
He would carry the weight of his choices, the memory of his nightmare, with him always.
But he would honor her memory, not with vengeance, but with a promise to live a life worthy of the love she had once given him.
He would never forget the lessons learned in the crucible of his nightmare.
The true horror was not the supernatural, but the darkness that resided within the human heart.